Hi, this is The Recovering Perfectionist. I'm Claire Barton and you're in the right place at the right time. If you're starting to feel like some of your perfectionism is really getting in the way of you moving forward, getting started or finishing anything, this is absolutely the right show for you. This is rehab for your perfectionism, baby, so grab yourself a glass of wine or a cuppa and let's get stuck into it. So I've got the amazing Delaney Van Baalen, who is a bookkeeper and accounting software specialist, aka my saviour and genius, and I absolutely love you. Hi, Delaney.
Hi.
Great to have you here. So I'm just going to, today, this episode's a little bit different to some of the others. So Delaney and I worked together over the course of several months earlier in 2016, setting up my finance systems for my personal banking or my personal finances and my business accounts, two business accounts, and subsequently my husband's business account as well. And I'm completely obsessed with Delaney. She's absolutely amazing for so many reasons, including all of her bookkeeping and finance bits and pieces. But we're actually going to be talking about something a little bit different today. But first of all, I guess, Delaney, tell us about what it is that you do and who you are and what's your business.
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
My background is accounting and software for decades. It's what I did at uni. It's what I've always done.
Yeah.
In the last 12 months, I've sort of made the conscious decision to focus in a different area, and I do specialise in online businesses now, so service-based businesses. Mm-hmm. I do that all from home. Mm-hmm. I occasionally get to meet a client in real life, which is very cool. Yep. But basically I do a couple of things. I generally find people come to me when they've tried to set up their own accounting software, and that's I specialise in Xero but also Wave. They've tried to do it, they've been invoicing clients, but they've just all of a sudden gone, do you know what, this is not working, it's a mess, I don't think I'm doing it properly, I'm a bit embarrassed or whatever. And that's when they come to me and say, oh, I'm not sure, help me understand, I don't know if it's right. So we generally do what I call a tidy up, what we did a bit with you. We go through, we fix it up, we put practices in place to make it nicer going forward. And then we do a range of things. Sometimes they're good to go and do it themselves, and just they've got the odd question, I'm in the background for them to jump in. Some people it turns into me actually doing their bookkeeping. Mm-hmm. And that's generally the starting point. People sort of in second year of their business where things are just getting serious and they're ready to really, do this properly and understand their numbers and not just do it historically and be crunching the numbers because you have to, because it's tax time or BAS time or something like that. It's because you want to in real time know where your business is and make informed decisions financially about your business and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And just to try and make it not scary and horrible. Like, I think there's a lot of people out there who they start a business and they're great at what they do, and they've got a niche market or an unusual skill or an unusual business idea or whatever, but they don't want to think about the admin and the finance side, and then it falls over because they just, and it's not that their business idea wasn't made. Exactly. They just didn't do that. And I just want to make people realise that don't do that. Like, if you do that, you're setting yourself up to fail, really. Make this thing that you're great at and love work by putting some stuff in place as early as possible. And honestly, some people, I've got some clients where I do like an hour a month bookkeeping. And it's not huge. It's just getting it in place and making it tick over, and it's not expensive. And once it's in place and working, it's really easy to maintain. So
yeah, totally. And I'm such a big fan of Wave, as you know, but even just having a system like I used to just use an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm a bit of an Excel spreadsheet geek. So I had lots of beautiful formulas and color codes and automation bits and pieces because I'm a total Excel geek. But just having that sort of thing is just so much more empowering. I think, like you said, it's not just about running a P&L report once a month or once a quarter and then sticking it in a folder never to be seen again. It's really about informing decisions and understanding where you're at, and can you afford to buy that next thing that you want to buy, or is it time to up your prices, or all that sort of thing. It can really inform so much strategic stuff in your business that's not just oh, okay, that's how much money I did or didn't make last month, that sort of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's...
And sometimes it's really great as well. With some of the systems, you can run reports where you can compare like this month or this quarter or whatever to the same quarter last year. And sometimes it's really great to go, do you know what? Actually, even though I feel busy and I'm a bit frazzled and I don't think I'm where I want to be, actually, compared to this time last year, look where I am, look what I've done, what I've achieved, you know, like that as well, to make that time, even if it's just, you know, like a 10-minute conversation with me every quarter, just to sit and focus on it for a minute and look back and appreciate what you've done and what changes you put in place to make the business be profitable and be generating money for you as a person, not just up with expenses.
Absolutely. And I think that whole kind of celebration and acknowledgement, because we do get stuck, and I talk about this a lot, we do get stuck in this perpetual moving forward, which is awesome. And I'm all for moving forward and keeping on doing the next thing and that sort of thing. But it means that we sometimes don't stop and smell the roses and go, oh, yeah, I've actually had a really great month, or I'm improving, or look where I was a year ago and look where I'm now.
Exactly.
I think that's a really critical thing. It's not just about, what we probably all have some experiences with in our jobs in the past, where you've literally just had to do a report because it was on your list of things to do.
Yeah.
For a meeting, you read one line and then it gets shredded or filed, never to be seen.
Yeah, I moved on to the next thing you're supposed to be talking.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I'm like that for myself as well, like not the money side, because I love nothing better than having to sit down and like do my own bookkeeping. But like it's things like for me, like having legal client agreements in place, and having a client process, and having a process of when a client finishes, what we often do and what I communicate with them, and marketing, and having my Facebook page being looked after and all that kind of stuff. Like for me to sit here now and compare back to where I was 12 months ago, it's like actually I have, I'm looking forward at what I want to do or what I haven't done yet, but I've achieved heaps as well. Like, so I understand what it's like for people. And some of the scary stuff for me is the marketing and the Facebook and all that, whereas the money side's easy. So I can completely more and more relate to how people feel, because I feel like that just about.
Right. Yeah.
Business.
So stick to your zone of genius and get Dee to do your books. Seriously. It will absolutely save so much time and effort. So I absolutely love that. However,
and you just give me the opportunity to do what I love doing.
I know, right? Well, you're welcome. Delaney also runs a Facebook group, which has been absolutely fantastic to just jump in and ask some questions every now and then without having to kind of track down an accountant or a bookkeeper one-on-one and all that sort of thing. So it's an awesome support network as well, which I love, and I'm sure everyone else in there as well.
Just recently there's a few bookkeepers in there as well, so I've recently got them all to put their hands up and say what they do and what they specialise in, because I don't specialise in everything. I don't work with QuickBooks and MYOB, and I don't work with legal. So I want to know what other people do as well, because if someone asks a question I don't know the answer to, I can tag them in and they'll answer, because everyone wants to help each other out. So
absolutely, I love it.
Hoping to move more towards all that as well.
Very helpful, beautiful. So all that aside, that's awesome, and I love your numbers thing, and we can totally geek out over Excel spreadsheet and numbers and reports and that sort of thing. However, the other super interesting thing about you is that you have done lots of traveling, and you've been that you've lived that laptop lifestyle and the mobilepreneur thing, which is kind of a hot topic at the moment. When I first came across you were living in Bali with your 2 little kids. Your husband was doing FIFO, so you were often there by yourself for several weeks at a time and that sort of thing. And I think we kind of bonded over that a little bit as well, because my husband, although I wasn't in Bali or overseas, my husband was also doing FIFO at the time. So I totally understood that whole, by yourself for 3 weeks, then he's back for a month, and that whole different dynamic it brings to the relationship and that sort of thing. But something that I really wanted to have a chat with you today about is that whole laptop lifestyle. And is it actually a thing, or is it a myth? Like, there's a lot of people sort of doing the laptop lifestyle, and they use the hashtag laptop lifestyle on Instagram while they're lying back next to the pool, and they've got the beautiful white bikini on, and their perfectly polished nails, and they're drinking a glass of wine at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I kind of want to call bullshit. I feel like that's probably an option, but what's the other option when you're doing it with kids? And what does it actually mean?
That woman doesn't have kids.
Exactly.
That woman doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, because before what started the Bali thing, just is before Bali, my husband with his existing job got seconded to a new role in South Korea for 9 months.
That's right. Yeah.
So I already had some bookkeeping clients that I knew really well, I'd worked with for a long time, and they were already on Xero. Mm-hmm. So it was easy to have a conversation with them and move. I'd already, when my second child was born, had started working a bit more at home for them, and like going in maybe once every second week rather than every week, whatever the case may be. So it was kind of an easy decision to have to move to that overseas thing. And Korea was only 1 hour time difference to Perth, where we lived at the time, where all my clients were, so it was kind of easy. But I think I always say, look, no matter where you live, if you've got kids, a giant chunk of your life is still the same. You've still got to feed them and clean them and entertain them and take them here and pick them up. And there's still a huge amount of admin that goes on just with having children, no matter where you live in the world.
Yeah.
So we had it initially in Korea, which is a very different environment to being in Bali. I was sort of a little bit isolated because all the other mums there, they were all there because their husbands were there for work, and they all did taekwondo or hiking, or and I was always like making excuses to not go to stuff because I just wanted to go sit home and look at my computer and do that. And that was great. But we had a little bit of help then. I didn't do a huge amount of work then, maybe like 10 something hours a week.
Yeah.
The move to Bali was sort of on my husband's bucket list, and it was something we decided to do, that whilst we were in Korea, everything was packed up, the house was rented out, everything was in. If he's going to want to do this Bali thing, let's do it now. And after finishing the secondment in Korea, he went on to the FIFO stage of the project.
Right, okay.
So we went there, and Bali is amazing if you like the heat. So personally, I struggle with the humidity. Yeah. But, I mean, it's definitely doable. And I think in Bali the difference is it's the kind of place where you can get help. Kids, you can easily hire someone that drops your children at school and picks them up. You can easily hire someone who does your grocery shopping. Yes. You can easily have someone that comes in, and that's kind of what's expected as an expat. Like, if you go and do all of that stuff yourself, you're sort of frowned upon by the locals because you could be there supporting another family.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So the reality, I think, of doing it in Bali is probably a bit clearer than in other countries. You have got that network of employment opportunities for people to take all of that day-to-day stuff for you. And I could definitely do it. I could take my laptop, I could take them, I could go and work from wherever I want, and I could jump on my scooter, which I love doing, and go wherever I want. But the mechanics was like I had to get the kids to school. If my husband was away, get the kids to school, 2 school bags on a scooter. Where does my laptop go?
Oh, my goodness.
I ended up finding that I did work from home a little bit more than being a bit sort of, today I'm going to work here.
Yeah.
And the reality of what I do is working a lot with some raw data and moving them into another system. Like I've got 2 screens.
Okay.
I always struggle to work just with my laptop, depending on what I'm doing, without having that. So the reality was, and I did go, there was a co-working space in Bali that I worked from a little bit. And that's kind of where I got introduced to all the online groups and all that kind of stuff, because I actually met.
Oh, cool.
That's Melanie Migdens and then Tash Corbin, and I met them in Bali, and that was kind of my introduction. I didn't know this whole online world. So it opened up to this idea I have niching down into a new area, but without knowing how to find those people. So,
interesting.
I think for me the struggle in Bali was the heat. So the humidity hit me, and on a good day I was grumpy because of the heat. So but the reality of getting stuff done, and I actually also had an accident in Bali and broke my ankle, so that in itself would be difficult because my husband was away at work. But we had someone that worked at the house, and she'd come early and she'd pick the kids up and help get them ready and take them to school and do the grocery shopping for me, and so I definitely had that support network. I probably wouldn't have even been able to handle that, doing that at home. Even if I was at home and my mum came and helped, for example, she would have to not be at work to help me, whereas her job was to help us. So we just increased their hours, and she did a bit more until Corrie got home and could sort of take over. So the other issue in Bali is the internet. So it wasn't reliable. Sometimes the power would just randomly go out. And I know lots of places have really great internet if it's working.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Whereas ours always worked.
It's always on.
When it's on, it's great. When it's off, you're bugging.
It's off, yeah.
Mine was slightly different. Mine was always on. It was just super temperamental.
Okay.
And my problem more was our power would go off because we lived in an area where there was lots of construction going on and new villas being built. They would just turn the power off because they were doing something on another villa, and then I would never modem. So, right. So that was the reality of it. And also the visa requirements over there is that you've got to there's 2 main types of visas people have. You can either have one where you've got to leave every 60 days, and then you have to go to another country, get a visa and come back. Lots of people do what's called a visa run and just go to Singapore for a couple of days. There was visa officers in Singapore that will process them for you within a 24-hour turnaround time. So you go and put them in one day, go back into Bali on a new visa.
Oh, right, yeah.
The other option is that you find a sponsor, so you pay that. It's kind of like, it's like a almost like a lawyer kind of associated role, but you found these sponsor people, and they basically put their name against yours and saying these people are responsible and do what they do. They're saying they won't do anything illegal or anything wrong, and then you sort of pay them for the privilege.
Okay.
And then you can stay for 6 months, but every 6 months you have to leave.
Yeah, right.
So that was the other thing. For me with the kids, it made more sense to be on the 6-month one. So, and the cost of living over there, it's cheap, but as soon as you want to live somewhere with a pool, it's a bit more expensive. You've got to pay the visas. If you've got stuff at home in storage, you've got to pay those flights to leave the country every 4 days or 6 months and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, as you know, we were planning on doing the same sort of thing from about now for a year or so. We were planning on going to Asia for maybe 6 months and then Europe, and for various reasons we haven't ended up doing that with Glenn's new job, my husband's new job, and that sort of thing. But it's really intrigued me, and I guess I'm sort of similar to you that I probably up until about a year ago, I had no idea really of this online business world and kind of how it works and what the dynamics were, and that it was an option, that I didn't have to kind of advertise in newspapers or online things that were, you know, in comparison quite antiquated, like what we sort of do now. So I was always really interested to know kind of how it works, because it sounds very romantic and you can just jump on a plane. I'm just going to go to Bali this week, and then next month I might go to Thailand, and then after that I'm going to duck over to Europe and spend a week in Spain, and then it's, you know, it sounds fantastic, and I think it's totally doable. But there's so many other different sort of layers that when you get start to look at the practicalities of it, it's kind of like, you know, you've got to weigh up the pros and cons, especially when you've got kids.
Absolutely.
Something that started to kind of freak me out when we were thinking about the Europe thing is we'd sort of planned it, we'd sort of worked out, you know, we'd go to Bali for the 3 months, then Thailand for the 3 months, then America for a month, then Cuba, then Turkey, and then spend the rest of the time kind of traveling through Europe. And it didn't really occur to me until about 2 months into this process about the time difference. I was like, how's that even going to work? Because, you know, I guess it had kind of entered my mind, but I hadn't really processed it in a really practical way, because most of my clients are in Australia. I do have a couple in like the UK and South Africa, and it's difficult enough now trying to sort of work out those just with those ones, and I'm either having to jump on Skype really late at night or early in the morning or something like that. And, you know, on the odd occasion that's fine, but I was like, that's my bread and butter, and that's what's supporting us to do the travel. That means that the time that I'm there, I'm probably going to be working at times when I would rather be spending time with the kids. So it's sort of like, you know, and then I thought maybe I can try and transfer my marketing efforts and focus more on groups that are over in Europe or something like that. But it was just, it was kind of a bit of a light bulb moment, I think, for me, where I kind of went, oh, it's not actually just as simple as putting our stuff in storage, getting our visas and going. Like it's, you know what I mean? There's kind of a balancing act. So I don't think it has to be as difficult as some people make it out to be, but I don't think it's as easy as a lot of people make it out to be either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, like, personally, I like moving around, but I also like putting roots down. So I know they sound like two mutually exclusive concepts, but go somewhere new, but then get that set up and sorted there and get a basis and a network, rather than just continue and unpack our bags and all that kind of stuff.
Right, and actually kind of move in.
And settle in and get to know people in the area and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely, I mean, I find it difficult, like, because we've just now moved to Melbourne. I'm so used to always being in the time zone behind everyone. I'm used to waking up in the morning and all the emails I sent last night have all already been replied, and I can sit at my desk and start working. But now it's the opposite. I wake up, no one else has woken up yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm probably awake, let's be honest.
Yeah.
We're always awake.
The other thing with the kids as well is, if they're school age, and even only if you're doing it for a couple of months, like, you need to keep them occupied. So whether that is because you're staying somewhere long enough to put them into a school or some kind of kindy or whatever options exist. So we had lots of options in Bali and Korea a little bit as well. Lots of options for our primary school age child, but for our daughter that was she was 15 months old when we left Australia, and she's 3.5 now. But there wasn't many options for that. So in Korea, you didn't really there was no daycare, there was no nothing until like 3. And even in Bali, there was it was presumed that you would have
daycare. A nanny.
Yeah, have like a nanny at the house. But that didn't work for me, because if the nanny was at the house and I'm trying to work, she just wanted to come in and hang out with me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so you need to either stay somewhere long enough for the children to have somewhere where they can go to, or you've got to be doing it yourself, you know, doing the entertainment and the homeschooling to whatever level that is, activities or painting or drawing or spelling on the age. That's a big chunk of your time where you think, well, I would just sit down and work. But if the kids are around, even if Dad's there, and even then, you know, the plan is, well, I'm working, but I'm working from home. Dad's here. They still know I'm home. They want to come and see what I'm doing. And my little one, she if you know someone's on Skype, like she's at kindy. It's Saturday. She's out with her dad today. But she would come in and be saying hi. Like she thought that was she thought that was her job. Her job was to come in and go, oh, that's mommy talking. I'm going to say hi. Yeah. So there's that from a time point of view as well. Like you think, oh yeah, I can just go and work what I want. But really, you've got to have the kids. You know, nothing's going to happen until they're entertained and sorted and looked after.
Yeah, and look, I think it probably, you know, there's probably families and kids out there who, it depends on the children. Like my kids are exactly the same. They're very much, they want to be involved. More like if my husband's here, they're happy to kind of do their own thing and they won't bother me too much if I'm doing like a call or something in my bedroom, for example, which is super professional, doing a call with my bed in the background. But I know that there are some kids out there who are like super. They couldn't really care less if their mum was there or not. So there's, you know, totally different kind of dynamics in that sort of family as well. Yeah, and it depends, I guess, also on your own kind of philosophy or your own style on the balance and blend thing. Like, are you cool with sitting and working while your kids are sitting on your lap, or does that really not work for you, or, you know, all that sort of thing. And everyone's completely different with it. So I think that's really interesting. So I'm interested to know, how did being in places, especially like Bali, I suppose, because you were there a bit longer than Korea, right? Or I guess with both of them, how would you say that kind of lifestyle, that laptop lifestyle and being in a different country with a different culture and different challenges with the internet and that sort of thing, how did it overall impact your business?
I think I mean, definitely the Bali thing was a major difference, but that was because of the people I met there that opened my eyes to all these groups that were in and how I could, like, advertising a newspaper, it's a bit of a cold, you don't know who's going to read it or who's going to see it, whereas dealing in business groups where you know that everyone is online or solo-based business or service-based business, you know, depending on the group that you're in, you already know their niche kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
That was definitely a little bit easier. I found Bali definitely, because initially we went to Bali, the area we picked to go in Bali, which was Ubud, was because of the school that was there.
Okay, yeah.
And all the other thing I knew about Ubud was like the health, the yoga and the vegan and the tree hugging. And I was just like, I'm an accountant. Where am I going to fit in? So in doing some Googling and researching a few things about it, I actually by mistake came across his co-working space.
Yes.
Which then there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are based out of these areas and also increasingly in other areas of Bali as well.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to a place where there was business environment and an entrepreneurial slant to it. So all the parents that are at school, I think because my kids we're at school number 4 now, hopefully we'll be here for a while, I've sort of had the chance to be the new school mum 4 times.
Yeah, right.
And I know I just was like, I don't want to come to school and talk to the same lady about the same thing as yesterday. Like, I really like you, but I've got to run because I've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I always found I was always avoiding people at the schools. And Korea was a big thing as well. But Bali was great because everyone else had their own stuff going on.
Okay.
So, you could just nip in and nip out if that's what you needed to do that day because everyone else knew that they might have a day where they need to do that. Also, it wasn't just the mums. The dads are there doing the school runs. And, you know, we had friends up the road. She was Chinese but had grown up in the UK and he was English. And she worked for a big Chinese payment processing software company which mainly sold their software to online gambling sites in China, which is a new big area. So she travelled a lot, like 1 to 2 weeks every month. She was in Vietnam or the Philippines or whatever, and he was home with the kids. So there was a lot of that stuff as well. So you would go to school and there was lots of dads at school and all that kind of. And then there was also lots of really interesting business conversations to have. So whether it was something that you specifically related to, there was just someone out there starting a new cafe or a new venture or a new this, and there was just really interesting conversations to be had.
Yeah, I've heard there's quite a buzz up there. Where I'm going for holiday in December and was spend the first week or so up there. So I'm really keen to kind of understand that. And I think it's a really interesting thing that possibly and like I said, I haven't done it, but in my perception and people I see do it, because you're already kind of out of your comfort zone, you almost are more open to those sorts of interesting conversations or situations or opportunities that you, if you were, sitting at home in Brisbane like I am, you kind of just in your own groove, you're in your routine, your schedule, so you almost got your blinkers on sometimes to sort of so comfortable you just do what you do. But when you're already in a different country and you're already around different people and you've kind of your senses and everything's a little bit more heightened because you've just got to be a bit more on your toes because you're not in the complete comfort zone that you're used to, that these sort of things do tend to happen. And I'm really interested for places like that it does seem to be such a hub, and that there are lots of people who have just had enough with the, living in the suburbs and that sort of thing in Australia. So they're after a bit of a change. And if they can make it work with their family and their time and their travel and lifestyle and all of that sort of thing, it's actually a really great opportunity. Like you said, you've got affordability can be so much better to have like a higher quality of life in so many ways, and also to be contributing to, other families and employing other locals and that sort of thing. And I absolutely love the opportunity that has in a twofold. So, for our kids to be able to see a different culture and a different way of living and, appreciate the difference and some worldly education, that they wouldn't maybe get so much if they were at home or something like that. So I think it just intrigues me, and I can't wait to give it a go at some point. I don't know when it's going to be now, but I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and the other thing about that as well is firstly, you're in an environment, especially in Bali, you're in an environment where you're just not the new person as well. Like everyone else has been the new person recently as well. Yes, there was some maybe longer term residents or people over there where one of the parents was Balinese, so that was kind of their home for the future. Yeah. But a big part of it was everyone else knew what it was like to be new, and everyone else, it wasn't like you just rocked up in a new area in Brisbane or you're in Melbourne and you're the new person and you don't know anything, but everyone else has already got their life that they've always had. It was a lot. You met people quite easily and everyone was super happy to share conversations. There was a Facebook page for parents of the school. So if you wanted to know, where do I get this, everyone was more than happy to jump on and advise and stuff like that.
It's
so you had that support network. Well.
Yeah, and I think it's that sort of transient population. I grew up in Darwin, and Darwin's very transient as well. Probably not so much as Bali, obviously, but there's a lot of tourists in the certain season, in the dry season. There's a lot of foreigners and that sort of thing, but then there was a lot of army and a lot of project and that sort of thing. So a lot of people were only there for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and then there was this thing. So it was just, I think that's probably what kind of breeds that culture of laid back, but also let's look after each other because we haven't got sick of each other yet. So.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But you know what it's like to be the new person, and a day or two with no contact is a bit scary, rather than go, well, they're new, we'll let them settle in. Because I've done that. I before I had kids and I met my husband and all that stuff, I've also travelled and worked overseas. And I remember I moved to a country and their philosophy on it all and their cultural thing was, we'll let you settle in first, then we'll invite you to stuff and then we'll include you in stuff. But there's just me for weeks on end with no one to talk to outside of work. Going, someone please, what's going on?
Yeah,
so there's that different culture as well. But also you haven't just got the culture of the country that you're in. You've got all the expats from the other areas.
Yeah.
So and also there was a lot of, especially in Korea, well, I guess both countries, the whole expat thing was the mixture of nationalities of the parents. Yeah. So my older daughter, she was like, well, dad's from Australia and mum's from Australia and I'm from Australia. And that's super boring. Yeah. Whereas in Korea, one of her good friends was mum was Chinese and dad was Danish.
Yeah, right.
She loved that. And then we had a mixture of friends in Bali where dad was Balinese and mum was American, or dad was Australian and mum was Balinese or Javanese. And then there was the American family, which dad was actually Japanese and they had an adopted daughter from Nepal.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then also the school we went to actually sponsored children from the local area to go to the school.
Fabulous.
So my daughter from a young age has learned it doesn't matter where you're from, what colour your skin is, where your parents are from, what your cultural beliefs are, how much money you have. We can go hang out and play because
so good. I've got goosebumps just thinking about that.
Yeah, and I really, really love that I want her. I want her to grow up knowing, because where we're living now, I didn't know this the other day. I went into a local cafe, and the guy that works in the cafe is maybe Middle Eastern looking, and I looked at him and I went, I've not seen a not white person.
Yeah.
After living in Bali, there's just this melting pot of cultures. I was like, oh my God, I live in like white middle class Australia. Like it was a weird realisation I hadn't noticed. So I think, and a lot of kids probably do that, especially depending on where they live. I love that. My little one to a certain extent, but she's probably going to forget about it. But my older one definitely
totally gets
up
it.
on who's from here, and she's fair. Remember this happened, and remember that happened, and remember, what being adopted means. And I've actually got some really good Danish friends from years and years ago, like 20 years ago, and they can't have children, and they've adopted a little girl from Ethiopia who is about 6 months younger than my daughter.
Yeah.
So they've been to visit us, and we've had holidays with them jointly and stuff like that. And she knows about, what being adopted means and
gets it.
And all that stuff. And they don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
My daughter doesn't speak Danish and their daughter doesn't speak any English. They cannot speak a word, and they're having a great time off running around and swimming and watching music videos on YouTube and dancing. They can't speak a word the same.
Beautiful.
So I really love that. I want my child to grow up in a country where it's not just about us, because we live in a pretty amazing country, and I don't think until you've experienced some stuff outside of it.
Yeah.
I mean, people saying, I don't want to pay tax and this and but I've lived in Bali. No one pays tax, and I can tell you that it shows.
Yeah,
you can see you've got to pay to go to school in Bali. If you can't afford to send your children to school, your children don't go to school. Even the local little government schools you pay. It's like $50 a month, but for Balinese, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the roads and the issues with the dogs and the traffic and the infrastructure, and there's no such thing as rubbish collection. They burn their rubbish or they put it in the closest river. Yeah. So I can tell you what it's like, and to say to my daughter, well, that's why Bali's like that, because of this, and understand that in Australia we have all of this, and we do have the government and we do pay tax, but this is what it's used for, and school's free and all this kind of stuff.
It's so interesting, and I think that kind of understanding at a young age about just the differences and that there's always a payoff. So, yes, we pay taxes and we have probably a higher standard of living in some ways, but we also pay a lot more for everything. Some people would argue that we're much more segregated because we're here. We have like a house and all of our kids live in different rooms and all that sort of thing. Whereas in that sort of a culture, it's much more about family and looking after, and you have several generations living in the same house, if not the same room, and that sort of thing. So there's always different payoffs. I think the kids to understand that at such a young age is absolutely like, how can you top that sort of thing? People kept saying, what about school for my my son's supposed to start school in 2018, and we were like, if he's a couple of years late and he's gotten all of this other social and worldly and environmental understanding, totally cool.
Yeah, and exactly, and that world education is just as important as the reading and the writing and the schooling part of it. You can catch up on the schooling, but you can't really catch up on that.
So true.
I don't know what the word, but just that from a young age, knowing that the world's a big place, and there's nothing wrong with being different, and there's nothing wrong with not understanding what someone's saying, or and it's that's
Beautiful.
really, really.
So that's awesome. I've loved chatting with you about that. Tell me, what would be your top couple of tips for anyone who's thinking about trying out somewhere like Asia with children, perhaps, and they've got a business? What sort of things would you say are the top things to kind of to make it more of a smooth transition and all of that?
Yeah. So definitely think about what sort of parent you are and how you're going to parent. So if you're the kind of parent that wants to be involved in your children's life and be there and have them home with maybe staff or all that kind of stuff, think about how that's going to affect your work day as well.
Yeah.
And think about whether that, knowing that, well, if I am the kind, like I was much better when the kids weren't home. I would not really work when they were home. It just wasn't really possible. And I couldn't focus and muck something's bookkeeping up. That's the last thing I want to do. So then that means that you've got to pick a country where you can settle for a little while so the kids can go to school. You know, you're not just going to jump up and go to school for a week or two and then move and move and move. So, and then look at what schools are available. And if you have got the younger kids, see what you can find out about that daycare, kindy, under 3 or 4 year old kind of age, because that's where we got stuck in both our places, that we just presumed that it would be that, and there was really limited options.
Well, even I believe even New Zealand don't take daycare until kids are 2.
Yeah, and that's what Korea was like. They didn't take them until they were 3. Yeah, they count how old you are in Korea slightly different, so they count the year that you're born. You're already 1. There's no such thing as 0.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. But then as soon as they hit 3, they all go to school. So then there was school buses, and they'd pick them up and they'd do this, and it was amazing. Up until that, there was literally nothing. And then we found something that was on the other side of the island where we live, about a 20-minute drive away, but it had been started up purely to cater for the expat community that were looking. So it was kind of filling a gap in the market.
Yeah, right.
The other thing to look at is requirements. Like from a money point of view, you've got your living expenses and they might look good, but think about what other expenses you're going to have to incur. So if you're going to have to put everything in storage at home, and if you've got a visa, where we got stuck as well, we didn't realise we had a visa. If we left the country, our visa was void.
Right.
Okay, so it wasn't a multi-entry visa, it was a single entry visa.
So if you want to
base yourself in a country and go in and out, in and out, in and out, you're going to be stuck. And because my husband Corey was having to leave every 2 or 4 weeks for work, he ended up having to get a multi-entry business visa, which meant that he was travelling for work, which wasn't really the truth as far as Bali went, but he was leaving the country because of work. So that meant he could come and go as he wanted, and he just had to leave every 30 to 60 days, but he was doing that anyway.
Right. Yeah. So
look at the practicalities of that and the limitations it might place, and also what it costs, and factor that in as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Thanks, Delaney. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I loved it. I hope everyone who's listening and watching has loved it as well. And how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in more information, particularly about your bookkeeping and Xero and Wave stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm just on Facebook in the groups. I'm Delaney Sky, if you've seen me amongst any of the groups, because I get getting myself confused. My business is actually Delaney Van Baalen is my name. So it's a bit convoluted. But if you search Delaney, probably you're going to come up with something like that.
Right.
Van Baalen.
There's not too many Delaneys around.
Yeah. No, there's not a huge amount of it. So you're Delaney Sky or Delaney Van Baalen, you can jump on and send me a message.
Awesome. And there'll be all the links to your website and your Facebook pages and everything in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch, please do. She's an absolute gem. Thank you so much, Delaney.
No problem. Thanks, Claire. Thanks for speaking to me.